Welcome on in, people. Welcome on in. Thursday. Our last day of new content. And then tomorrow's going to be a review day. And then it's see you guys later for 3 weeks, unfortunately. Man, we're almost there. We're almost to the finish line. We're almost to Unit 4, and then Unit 5 is very, very quick, right? But we're going to have to wait on that. All right, you sitting low a little bit right now? No. All right, people. What are some announcements we have today? First announcement is make sure you finish your Unit 3 AP Classroom MCs. I'm going to hopefully give you guys a lot of time to do that today. The problem set I'm going to give you today is very, very short. It's only like 3 like big sort of questions that you need to do. And then hopefully you can use the rest of the hour to start tackling those Unit 3 AP Classroom MCs. I've noticed one student has completed it, and she's done really well. Only missed one question, which is amazing. So I hope you guys all do the same. And then the Unit 3 test is going to be posted tomorrow. Now, it might be posted tonight, but I don't want to make any promises. I might get to it tonight, and I might have it available tonight. But, you know, for sure, it's going to be posted tomorrow. And then I'll give you guys, you know, some days going into the next week to do it. You're going to have a lot of time to do it, so no worries. And then what I also did today is I changed the weekly agenda just a little bit, right? We were supposed to talk about just the tax multiplier today, and then problems with fiscal policy tomorrow, but the tax multiplier is not going to take all that long, so I'm just going to do both of those agenda items today, and then tomorrow what we're going to do is we're going to do a review session. I think it's going to be much more beneficial for us all, because I want to talk about the Phillips curve again. I want to talk about the ADS model again, so I'm just going to kind of review Unit 3 tomorrow, and then what the game plan is. It might end class kind of early, we'll see, and then I'll just like give you that time to start taking your Unit 3 test. Might be the idea, right? So we'll do a review, and then you can hop right from the review right to the test, and hopefully it'll make things a lot easier for you on a Friday. We'll see. All right, that's kind of the game plan where we're at right now. I posted problem set 3.6. Make sure the answer key, make sure you look at that. That was the Phillips curve problem set, which is probably really tough for a lot of you guys. Not that it's like really hard concepts or anything, but it's hard to like graph, right? I know it becomes in a situation where like you want to complete the problem set without graphing, and it's really, really hard to do. People, when I was doing the answer key, I had to like really think about my answers. And I know I've been doing this for 7 years, but I would find it really, really impossible, really difficult to do the problem set without graphing on a separate sheet of paper. All right, that's the biggest thing I'm worried about is you guys not graphing. So we're gonna have to make sure we tackle that. Oh, also, someone has to remind me, if I don't remind myself, in Google Meet today, I want to post FRQs for you. I'm not gonna make you guys do these FRQs, but I want to at least give you those FRQs so you have them, right? And you can do them if you wanted to do them. I'm going to give you guys a bunch of ADS model, Unit 3, Phillips curve FRQs that, you know, they're FRQs that would ask you to graph, and obviously there's going to be no way I can like really grade those unless I have you like take a picture or whatever, submit it, like, which I'm not going to do, but I want to have those available to you because some of you guys want those, right? Some of you guys want to do really well on this AP test, so I want to at least make sure you're exposed to those sort of questions, all right? And then the last announcement is problem set 3.7 is due tonight. Problem set 3.7 is due tonight, all right? That was the first multiplier one, the one you guys did yesterday, which I thought was pretty easy. But again, Mr. Moore, you've been doing this forever. I know. It's supposed to be easy, I guess. But, all right, people, your attendance in the chat today is... I hope we didn't do this one. I don't think we've done this one. I know we've done, if you had to live in a different country, what country would you live in? I don't think we've done this one. If you had to live in a different state, what would it be and why? I forgot to put and why on there. You have to put and why. All right, you have to put and why. I totally forgot. Mr. Moore, I totally forgot. And why. And if you already put your answer in there, make sure you rewrite your state and why, or else I'm not going to be able to put those together, right? And why. All right. Ooh, this is fun. This is very, very fun. All right. All right. Okay, so Like if you've already typed, I'm just gonna go down to like where there's explanation. So re-put your thing up there, okay? All right, we got Texas, no state income tax. Interesting. Okay. Let's see. Definitely New York, because I love big cities. I love big cities too, and I've always kind of wanted to live in a big city. I don't know though. It's really weird. Like I either want to live in a big city or I want to like live like with a lot of land. Like one of the two extremes. I don't like being sort of in the middle. Let's see here. South Carolina, the weather, or New York. Okay. A lot of you guys are saying weather because it's very pretty there. What did Sophie say? Colorado. Ooh, Colorado would be pretty cool. I visited Colorado twice now. Colorado is really cool. That's probably going to be on my list here in a second. New York, because New York has good food. Oh yeah. I mean, you think about the best food in the U.S., it probably is in New York because there's probably such a wide range of food available. Florida weather. People, you guys are saying Florida because of the weather, because you probably go in the springtime. Have you guys ever been to Florida in like August? Oh my gosh, it's unbearable. Oh my gosh, it's unbearable. Have you guys ever been to Florida in the summertime? You guys getting me over here? Alaska, because it's nice there. Ooh, Alaska would be kind of cool. North Carolina, I'm moving there when I graduate because I want to go to college there. I knew that, Sydney. That's pretty cool. New York, because I love New York City. Vermont, it's beautiful. Ooh, Vermont's kind of on my list as well, Maddie. Vermont's on my list. Florida, because it's very nice in the warm weather. I could play baseball year-round. Ooh, I like that. Okay. Massachusetts, because it seems chill there and nice, fun. Yeah, I like Massachusetts as well. I'm with you there on that, Luke. Texas, good weather and low cost of living. Texas does have a pretty low cost of living. I think their wages are pretty low, though, at the same time, at least for professions that I know of. I know teachers get paid very, very minimal there, obviously because they have very low taxes. Colorado, because I snowboard and they have some amazing ski resorts. Colorado's sweet. Florida weather, good. New York, big city. Vermont's pretty cool. I've been to Vermont before. Vermont is pretty cool. It's very different. North Carolina, mix of mountains and beaches. North Carolina's pretty. Colorado, because I think it's beautiful and they actually have every season, unlike Michigan, who combines all of it. Colorado's cool. I think Colorado, out of all the states, has one of the most number of days of sunlight in a year. They have a lot of sun in Colorado. The weather is usually pretty mild, which is nice. Recently, there's been a lot of snow, actually, but Florida, more stuff to do. North Carolina, Colorado, because it's so pretty there. My grandma lives there. A lot of you guys in Colorado. You guys don't know this about Colorado, too. Colorado has the most, like, transplant, like, people. Like if you go to Colorado, like, most people that live in Colorado are from another state, which is really, really cool. There's a lot of young people in Colorado, too. Colorado, because it's so pretty there. Oh, yeah, we did that. Florida, because nice weather. Wait, I lied. Washington is gorgeous, and it's just cool. Washington's pretty cool as well. Washington, Oregon. Massachusetts, because it's pretty and has some great, very good schools on the Northeast. All right, so I would say potentially Colorado. I'm with you guys on that. Yeah, Texas high school football is crazy. I would say Colorado, Oregon, California, Arizona, or the Northeast. I would say that. And why? A lot of it weather. I guess like politics a little bit. I would say. I don't know. I just think I would like living in those different countries. I think Arizona would be really cool. I think I would like living in the desert. I don't know why. I went to New Mexico for 3 weeks and I just like I liked it. I don't know why. I don't know how to explain it. Like I just liked like the dry heat, not humid, but like dry heat was really cool. If you guys have never been there. All right, people. Let's do it. Let's move on here. Let's get to what we got to do today. All right. We honestly don't have a whole lot, okay? Oh, hold on. I need to pull up something. 1 second here. 1 second. I need to get something ready here. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Cool. I'm going to miss you guys. I'm going to miss you. Alrighty, people. Let's start off with a little review for a second here. I think we did this one, and then we'll do one we haven't done yet. But fiscal policy, right? what do you need to know from yesterday? All right. Well, first off, you need to know the difference between non-discretionary and discretionary fiscal policy. Remember that non-discretionary fiscal policy means no action needs to be taken. Non-discretionary, no action, right, needs to be taken. So those are called automatic stabilizers. And I think we're going to talk more about those today. I got to look. But you have to know what an automatic stabilizer is. It's things that kick in to help reduce the fall in aggregate demand in a recessionary gap, or help mitigate the rise in aggregate demand when we go into an inflationary gap, right? So like generally, if we were going to an inflationary gap, generally taxes helps combat the rise in aggregate demand, right? Higher income taxes helps prevent aggregate demand from going too far into an inflationary gap. And then generally, what combats aggregate demand from dipping too far into a recessionary gap, automatic stabilizers, is like welfare and food stamps and things of that nature, or unemployment compensation. So that's non-discretionary fiscal policy, also known as automatic stabilizers. You need to know that. It's on your MCs. Discretionary fiscal policy is when Congress has to get together. No fiscal policy is what Congress controls, right? And that's when Congress gets together and they pass new laws, right? New spending bills or tax legislation to help, combat whatever, gap that we're in, all right? So here, we're in an inflationary gap, right? So do we need to use contractionary or expansionary fiscal policy? We'd want to use contractionary fiscal policy. Remember, contraction means like to shrink, right? To slow down. It's when on the business cycle we're going down, right? So we're trying to use contractionary fiscal policy. We're trying to do that. We're trying to make the economy go down. We're trying to decrease real GDP. We're trying to increase unemployment, right? And the reason we're probably doing this is we're trying to combat inflation. That's when we want to use contractionary fiscal policy. All right. So what two options do we have? What two options are contractionary fiscal policy? It's raising taxes or lowering government spending. Both of those things would decrease aggregate demand and get us back to LRAS, right? If we don't do any sort of policy, what's going to happen is aggregate supply is going to decrease, and that's how we get back. But if we do policy, we're going to change AD to get us back, in the short run, right? Instead of waiting for the long run to happen. So how much is needed to close the gap? Well, first, in order to get that, right, you have to identify the multiplier. The multiplier is 1 over MPS. That's why they usually give you MPC for that added step. You just subtract 1 from the MPC because you can either save or consume. So if people are spending 50% of all new income, they must be saving 50% of all new income. 1 over 0.5 is 2, right? So whatever we do is going to get multiplied by 2. So we're going to decrease spending by 10 billion, right? I hope you guys see how I did that, right? If the gap is 20 billion and we decrease spending by 10 billion, right? That decrease in 10 billion is going to become a decrease in 20 billion, right? That's the idea. It's like we remove government spending, we cut government spending by 10 billion. That if left alone would have otherwise equated to $20 billion in government spending, right? So that we're going to decrease aggregate demand by cutting spending by 10 billion because the multiplier is 2. 10 times 2 is 20 billion, right? So make sure you use your negatives appropriately, right? And don't use double negatives. Don't say decrease government spending by negative 10 billion, right? Decrease by 10 billion or, right? Okay, anyway, next up is another, is this the same? That's the same, right? So we're just going to do one example. All right, let's skip it. All right, so that's the spending multiplier. We know how to do the spending multiplier, hopefully, by this point, right? It's just 1 over MPS. That's the multiplier. And then we just multiply how much the government does. Say the government spends 100 billion and the multiplier is 2, and the change is going to be 200 billion. Sometimes you're given a graph, right, and you're given a gap, and you're asked to, identify how much should the government spend to close the gap. That's what we just did right there, right? So just think about are we multiplying or are we dividing, right? Are we trying to figure out how much the government should spend, or the government spent this, right? What's it going to become, all right? But what about the tax multiplier, right? Like if government changes taxing, right? How are we going to know how much aggregate demand is going to change by? It's the same idea, but it's going to be very, very similar but slightly different, all right? The tax multiplier is going to work like this. It says the multiplier effect also applies when the government cuts or increases taxes. But changing taxes will always have less of an impact to the economy than changing government spending. And the reason is this. There's always going to be one less ripple effect, okay? So let's do a little example here. It says expansionary fiscal policy, right? Cutting taxes or increasing government spending. Both of those would be expansionary fiscal policy. So let's assume the MPC is 0.75. Some quick math would be 1 over 0.25, which the multiplier would therefore be 4, right? So if the government was to increase spending, let's do that first. If the government was going to increase spending by 4 million times 4, 4, 8, 12, 16, aggregate demand would change by 16 million, right? Aggregate demand would increase by 16 million if the government increased spending by 4 million. The multiplier is 4. But here's why the multiplier is always going to be less with taxes, and why taxes are always less effective in terms of fiscal policy, changing the economy than changing government spending will be, right? If the government cuts taxes by 4 million, how much will aggregate demand actually change by? Well, here's the thing, right? It's not going to be 60 million like we just identified. It's because there's one less ripple effect. When the government initially cuts taxes by 4 million, right? Those people that got those tax breaks, what are they going to do? They're going to save a portion of that and spend a portion of that, right? So like if this is government spending, right, the government's going to initially spend 4 million, right? And then after that 4 million is spent, at that point when that 4 million becomes income, some of it's going to be saved, some of it's going to be spent, and then it's going to get, multiplied from there, right? When the government cuts taxes by 4 million, given this scenario here, right, consumers right off the bat are going to save 1 million, and then they're going to spend 3 million. So instead of 4 million being that initial amount of aggregate demand, that initial amount of spending, it's only going to be 3 million, because right off the bat people are going to save a portion of it, whatever the MPS is in this economy. So the initial amount of aggregate demand is going to be 3 million, and then after that, that's going to get spent and saved, right, and then multiplied, right? So there's always one less ripple effect. I hope that makes a lot of sense. When the government spends $4 million, that's going to be the change in aggregate demand, and then from there it's going to get saved and spent and saved and spent, right? When government changes taxes, right off the bat, a portion of that's going to be saved, and then the other portion is going to be spent. So our initial amount of spending here is 4 million. Our initial amount of spending over here is 3 million. And then again, it's going to get sliced up and whatnot. So an easy trick is this. A very, very easy trick is this. You always subtract the multiplier by 1 if it's talking about taxes, right? So like if you're given this situation, it says MPC is 0.75, and the government changes spending by 4 million, right? The multiplier would be 4, so it'd be 12 million. If it says how much the government, if the government cuts taxes by 4 million, and this is the scenario, right? What's the multiplier? The multiplier is going to be 3, all right? You just subtract 1, like the number 1, from the multiplier because of that idea that there's one less ripple effect. So in this case, right, how much is aggregate demand going to change by? How much is consumer spending going to change by? It would actually be 12 million would be the appropriate answer, right? Because the multiplier is not 3, not 4, it's 3. That's the easiest way. And it's easy to remember, right? Come May, when you take the AP test, is how to calculate the spending multiplier is 1 over MPS. If it instead asks about taxing, right, still do 1 over MPS and then subtract that number by 1. That's the idea that there's one less ripple effect. I hope that makes a lot of sense. Okay? So what you could do, I kind of did it differently down here, right? What I did was some students like there's 2 ways to do it, right? Some students will take they'll subtract 1 by the multiplier, so they'll do 4 million times 3. That's the easiest way, I think, to do it. Or what you could do is multiply the initial amount of spending, 3 million, times the original multiplier, the spending multiplier, which is 4, right? Like if you take out the amount of savings from that change off the bat and then multiply it by the initial multiplier, you'll get the same answer, right? Because it's the same idea. But I think the easiest way to do it is just make sure the tax multiplier is 1 less. Whatever the change is, multiply that by the change, and you'll get your change in aggregate demand. All right. So let's do. Let's see here. If the MPC is blah blah blah. There it is, right? So the simple tax multiplier is 1 minus 1 over MPS, because it's 1 less ripple effect is the easiest way to think about it. If spending multiplier is 4, then the tax multiplier is 3. We basically just did all the work on this slide. Okay? So let's do some examples, right? If the MPC is 0.8, right? The MPC is 0.8, the spending multiplier would be 1 over 0.2, which would be 5. So whatever the government spends is going to get multiplied by 5. That's going to be the net change in aggregate demand. So if the MPC is 0.8 and the spending multiplier is 5, what's the tax multiplier? Well, the tax multiplier would be 4. So whatever the government spends or changes taxes by will get multiplied by a factor of 4, and that's going to be the change in aggregate demand. You just subtract 1 from the spending multiplier, okay? All right. Please put a 1 in the chat if you understand the tax multiplier. Like the concept that it's just 1 minus the spending multiplier. Put a 2 in the chat if you're confused. Okay? 1 if you got it, 2 if you're confused. And then we'll revisit it in Google Meet if we need to. Right? Let's do some more examples while you guys are doing that. Congress uses discretionary fiscal policy to manipulate the following economy. This is what your problem is actually going to look like right now. Wouldn't the equation be different? What you mean, Luke? What you mean? Congress uses discretionary fiscal policy to manipulate the economy. So again, this is what your problem is going to look like. I'm going to give you an MPC. I'm going to give you a graph of the economy. There's going to be some sort of gap, and what you need to do is identify how much should government change spending by and how much should government change taxing by. All right? So let's do a little example here. So again, what are we going to use, right? We're going to use expansionary fiscal policy. So there are two options of that. Would be increase government spending here, because that would increase AD, or we would decrease taxes. Both of those would increase aggregate demand. So how much should we increase government spending by? Should be 1 divided by MPC minus 1. Yeah, that's pretty much it, yeah. Wait, 1 over MPC. That's pretty much it. I think you get a negative there, though. I think you get a negative there. 1 over MPC would be like, 1 over... Oh, instead of doing 1 over MPS, you're doing 1 over MPC? I got to double check that. I'll double check that in Google Meet with you, Luke. I'll double check that with you. All right, anyway. All right, so spending would be 10 billion, right? Why is that? Well, again, what the multiplier is 1 over MPS, 1 over 0.5 is 2. So if the government increases spending by 10 billion is going to be multiplied by a factor of 2. That would equate to $20 billion change in aggregate demand, and that would correctly close the gap, all right? So what should we do to taxes then? Right, that's what we just learned about, right? Well, if the spending multiplier is 2, that means the tax multiplier is 1. In other words, whatever we change the taxes, right, will not actually be multiplied at all. So the appropriate answer would be we're going to decrease taxes by 20 billion, all right? We're going to decrease taxes by 20 billion, okay? Or change taxes by negative 20 billion, however way you want to write it, all right? That's the idea. Do I have another example here? No, I do not. Okay, so that's the idea, right? Let's say this. Let's say this is let's change. Let's say the MPC is 0.75. Let's do that one, all right? Hopefully it's there's no decimals here. Let's say the MPC is 0.75, right? So how much will we change government spending by, right? Well, in this case, the multiplier is 4 because I did 1 over 0.25. The multiplier is 4. So if government increases spending by 5 billion. Right, 5 times 4 would be 20 billion. So the government should increase spending by 5 billion would be the answer in this case, right? The MPC is different, right? And remember this, right? If the multiplier is higher, the government doesn't have to spend as much because if the MPC is higher, the multiplier will be higher. Is the idea. So if the spending multiplier is 4, that means the tax multiplier is 3, which is going to be like a decimal here. So the government should cut taxes by 20 divided by 3, which would be like a little less than 7, right? 20 divided by 3. So if the government cuts spending by $6.66 billion, that would close the gap, right? Because again, the tax multiplier is 3, the spending multiplier is 4, is the idea. All right, people, we're going to move on from that. All right, and again, there's lots of practice questions embedded in the PowerPoint. All right, so next let's talk about problems with fiscal policy, right? So on paper, fiscal policy sounds like a really, really, easy way to fix the economy, right? If we're in a recessionary gap, increase spending, lower taxes. If we're in an inflationary gap, raise taxes, lower government spending, right? But there's a lot of problems, right? One, obviously, that no one spends and saves the same amount, right? Everyone's different. A lot of people, lower income, right, spend 100% of all new income earned. They have to, right? Wealthier people generally save a lot higher percentage than they spend, right? Because they can. So people are not all the same is the idea. So it's very, very difficult to just, for the government to sit down and come up with a number and be like, yeah, well, the MPC in this economy is this. So like if we dump in this much money, we're going to correctly, close the gap, right? Much more difficult. So we're going to talk about problems with fiscal policy, the 5 problems with fiscal policy. The first problem is If we use expansionary fiscal policy to close a recessionary gap, it's going to cause deficit spending to occur, right? Deficit spending. So you need to know what a budget deficit is and what a budget surplus is. A budget deficit is when we spend more than we take in. It's when expenditures are greater than revenue, right? So what would cause a budget deficit? Expansionary fiscal policy. If at any time that we increase government spending and we keep taxes the same, that's going to cause a budget deficit. Taxes is the way that governments collect revenue, right? So if we keep taxes the same and we spend more, we're going to be operating at a loss, right? We're going to be operating in a deficit. That's like if you spent more money, every month, and you still receive the same amount of income from your job. You're going to start borrowing on a credit card, right? What happens a lot is we do both, right? We increase spending, and simultaneously we lower taxes. Again, that's going to cause even more massive budget deficits. So if we run a budget deficit, if we spend more than we take in via tax revenue, that's going to obviously accumulate a national debt. And we're going to look at that here in a second, all right? The problem is this, right? It says if the government increased spending, blah, blah. So the problem is this, right? Running a budget deficit is okay, right? And it says it here at the bottom, because if we get out of a recession quicker, right, we produce more goods, there's going to be more taxable goods and more taxable income, and we can pay off what was needed to pay for that increase in aggregate demand, right? The problem is this, right? When times are good, we never operate with a budget surplus, right? Like if we're in an inflationary gap and unemployment's extremely low, that is the appropriate time, fiscally responsible time, to raise taxes and lower government spending. That way, when times are tough, we can run a deficit and we'll have money saved up, right? And we can draw on that instead of having to lower taxes or et cetera, right? We can increase government spending with our own spending, right? With our own money, right? So again, if fiscal policy is used appropriately, deficit spending isn't bad. The problem is that we basically just only do deficit spending when times are good and when times are bad, right? Is the idea. And here's just, before we get to the debt clock, and you can see it's a bipartisan issue. Is no matter the red or the blue, generally we like to conduct deficit spending, right? In general, right? Democrats like to raise government spending, and in general, Republicans like to lower taxes. Both of those things would cause a budget deficit to occur. We'll talk about politically motivated policies here in a second, but that's the world we live in, right? In order to become president, generally, if you say I'm going to raise taxes, it threatens a lot of Americans for whatever reason, right? Like it really scares a lot of Americans if you say you're going to raise taxes, even if we're in an inflationary gap, right? People don't like losing money out of their own wallets, and Americans in general are pretty selfish. And then obviously, right, if you're going to try to become president and say, hey, we're going to lower government spending, right? We're going to take entitlements away from people. Generally, that's not the way to get in office either, right? If you say I'm going to give you guys less stuff and I'm going to tax you more, right? Generally, people don't vote for those candidates, unfortunately, right? So this is old, right? This ended in like 2013, 2014, and then I put this projection on there last year, pre-COVID, right? And obviously, since COVID, the government has spent much more money. So like this is probably like absolutely going through the roof over here. So just be understanding of that. So let's go to the debt clock. This is pretty fun to always look at every year. So obviously, right, we generally run a budget deficit. If you guys look here, here's the budget deficit right now, right? You can see that it's increasing, right? And you can kind of see like why, right? Well, look at the U.S. federal tax revenue is going down, right? Lowering of taxes is going down, all right? And yet, at the same time, right, you can see that we're spending more. We're spending more money, right? And we're lowering taxes. Now, at this time, since COVID, right, this is the appropriate measures to take, right? Because obviously, we're in a recession, right? Unemployment's high, output's lower, economic growth rate is negative. So this is the fiscally responsible time to be doing this, right? To be lowering taxes and to be increasing the amount of spending. However, before March, right, before COVID, we were most certainly in an inflationary gap. Unemployment was extremely low. Unemployment was 3.9%, And that would have been the appropriate time to be raising taxes and to be lowering the government spending, right? The problem was we were not doing that, and we haven't been doing that. The last time we've done that was Bill Clinton in the late 90s. Was the last time we ran a budget surplus. But there was times where we're like, we shouldn't have, right? During the Bush administration, we were at war, which is very, very costly. And we suffered a small little recession in 2001. And then obviously when Obama took office, he inherited one of the biggest recessions of all time. So that was obviously an appropriate time to use expansionary fiscal policy. All right, so take that, right? Anyway, so obviously, right, if we run this deficit, right, you can see that the national debt is going to continue to increase here, right? So we're at what, 27 trillion now. It's cool. You can like kind of go back in time. So like 2016, it was 20 trillion, right? So it's increased by a lot in just 4 years, from 20 trillion to 27 trillion. If you go back to 2012, right, we're at 15. We go back to 2008, we're at 10. 2004, probably pretty close to when you guys were born, was 7 trillion, right? So when you guys were born, the U.S. national debt was 7 trillion. And just in the last 4 years, the national debt has increased by that amount, which is pretty crazy to think about. Now you can also go forward, right? You can go to 2024, and we're expected to be at 48 trillion in just 4 years, from 27 trillion to 48 trillion. So that is definitely alarming, right? I would say. But there's also really cool things on here you can look at if you're ever bored, right? Just go to the debt clock on here. People, look at U.S. population, 343 million. Wait for it. Wait for it, people. Wait for it. Welcome to the world. A new baby has been born. Welcome on in. Newest American here. Welcome on in. Welcome on in. Hey, look at this, people. It's pretty cool. The actual unemployment rate and the official unemployment rate, right? It's generally understated. Remember that, right? Full-time workers, part-time workers, pretty sweet. Just everything's kind of on here. It's nice, and we'll talk about uniform monetary policy here. All the money creation and M1 versus M2 money and things like that. But yeah, interesting, people. You guys got any questions about this? Pretty cool. I hope you guys can see it on yours. You should be able to see it on yours. All right, cool. All right, so let's go back to what we got to talk about. So obviously, the whole point is the problem with fiscal policy is if we only use expansionary fiscal policy, the consequence of that is going to be we're going to run up a national debt, right? Now, the national debt isn't all scary, right? It's pretty scary, but it's not all scary because a lot of this debt is owed to U.S. citizens and U.S. firms and things of that nature, right? But obviously, that's pretty alarming, I would suggest. All right, so let's go to here, right? So what are some other problems with fiscal policy? The number 2 is timing, and we've talked about this already, right? If we go into a recession, right, it's going to take a lot of time for Congress to actually use discretionary fiscal policy. It takes time for Congress to get together and pass a bill to increase aggregate demand, whether that's lowering taxes or that's increasing government spending. Same thing if we were in an inflationary gap, if we actually did that. No, we don't. But, one, we got to recognize the issue. How far into a recession are we? Which obviously takes time to get macro measures and data on that. It takes time for Congress to actually pass legislation because usually we're in gridlock, and it appears that we're going to be in gridlock again for the next 4 years as well. And then it takes time to actually do it, right? It takes time to actually, it took me a good, 2 months to get my little $600 check. I was like one of the last ones to get my $600 check, albeit so small. It takes time to actually do and conduct discretionary fiscal policy. Recognize the issue, pass legislation, and then follow through on it. It takes a lot of time, right? Maybe so much time where we close the gap, right? We get out of the gap, for other reasons, right? And then obviously, if we get out of recession naturally, and then we do this, right, this might push us into an inflationary gap. Number 3, I've touched on this already a little bit, is politically motivated policies, depending upon the country. And that usually stems from term limits. Now, we need term limits, obviously, right? We don't want to live in a country where we have the same president for 20, 30 years, right, which is the case in other countries. But an unintended consequence of having term limits is generally politicians are very short-sighted, right? Politicians what's the number one goal of a politician if you're taking government right now? Mr. Reich and anyone else will tell you that the number one goal of a politician is to get reelected, right? Because that's your job, right? To get reelected. So politicians are short-sighted, right? They're not trying to do what's best for the next 10 years. They're trying to do what's best for the next 4 years or 2 years or 6 years, depending on senator or rep or whatever, right? So generally, right, there's an incentive to always use expansionary fiscal policy, right? Even if we're in an inflationary gap, is the idea. Number 4 is a big one, right? Number 4 is kind of different than everything else we talked about. Number 4 is we're gonna revisit this when we talk about Unit 4 because it's gonna happen again. But crowding out, what does crowding out mean? Crowding out, basically, think about basketball like when you're boxing somebody out, right? You're preventing someone from doing something. That's the idea of crowding out. Crowding out is when the government does something, maybe with the best of intentions, right? The best of intentions, right? The government increases spending because we're in a recessionary gap, right? So the government's like, let's build a bunch of libraries, maybe, right? We're going to build a bunch of libraries because that's government spending. We're going to hire people to build the libraries, and obviously those libraries are going to have to employ workers, right? It's going to put more money in the system. That spending is going to get multiplied. Perfect, right? It's going to close the recessionary gap. Well, if we build more libraries, what are the unintended consequences of that? Well, the unintended consequence could be, right, people stop buying books on Amazon, right? People stop buying books anywhere, right? So that's going to cause, an increase in government spending might simultaneously decrease consumer spending is the idea, right? So with the best of intentions, we calculate it, right? We try to increase AD to close the gap. Well, in doing so, we crowded out other economic activity from otherwise happening, right? If we build public libraries, people will spend less on books privately, which is a decrease in aggregate demand. So we won't entirely close the gap like we think, right? The government increased spending by, and they're forced to borrow money, right? So we're forced to borrow money. If we do that, it's going to push up interest rates in the loanable funds market. We'll talk more about that in Unit 4. But if the government borrows money, that's going to push up interest rates. And if we push up interest rates, people will buy less cars, people will buy less houses, businesses will invest less, they'll take out less loans, so that will also decrease aggregate demand. That's the idea. When the government does something to increase AD, generally there's going to be some sort of unintended consequence, and it's going to cause some economic activity from otherwise occurring to be less. So it will not entirely close the gap as anticipated. That's a big problem with fiscal policy. And again, we're going to talk more about this with Unit 4, but for now, what crowding out is. When the government does something, and when they did something to increase aggregate demand, they simultaneously decrease aggregate demand because there's going to be less consumers or businesses buying other things, right? Same if we went to an inflationary gap as well. All right, so and the last one is net export effect, and it's basically that if we try to change aggregate demand, obviously there's going to be a change to aggregate price level in our economy. So say we were in a recessionary gap and we did things to increase AD, aka lowering taxes or increasing government spending. In doing so, we're going to increase price level and also interest rates. If we increase price level, less foreigners are going to want to buy our goods, which is going to be a decrease in exports, which is going to decrease aggregate demand. Kind of the same idea as crowding out. Or if price level goes up, we know that interest rates will also go up. Well, if that happens, right, people are going to take out less loans from the U.S., right? Less money is going to pour into the U.S. is the idea. So that's the idea. So basically the same idea as crowding out. When we try to increase AD, price level is going to go up, so foreigners are going to buy less of our goods, which would simultaneously decrease aggregate demand. All right, people. I think that's pretty good. I think we're done for Unit 3, which is nice. So yeah, tomorrow I promise I'll give you guys a really nice Unit 3 review session. That way you can kind of go right from there, right to the test, tackle it, do well, get it done, and then yeah, that'll be it. All right, people, I will see you guys in Google Meet. You can take your break if you need it, and I'll post the short problem set, and then I'll hopefully give you guys time to do your AP Classroom MCs. So see you.